When a domestic violence injunction is filed in Wisconsin, the legal intent is clear: immediately separate a documented abuser from their weapons. The state relies on these orders to diffuse highly volatile environments before they escalate to lethality. But the execution of that law, specifically under Statute 813.1285, relies almost entirely on an honor system. Instead of dispatching deputies to physically search a property and seize firearms, local courts ask the abuser to fill out a self-reporting form. They check a box admitting what weapons they have, and the court simply trusts them to hand those weapons over. There is zero mandatory physical verification by law enforcement. The system weakens further when abusers use the state's third-party proxy loophole. Under this rule, a judge can authorize an abuser to surrender their arsenal to an unvetted relative, roommate, or neighbor instead of the sheriff's department. This creates a dangerous scenario known as constructive possession. The abuser technically doesn't hold the weapon, but they maintain complete, unmonitored access to it through someone in their immediate social circle. It also directly conflicts with federal safety mandates under the Gun Control Act. Crucially, the victim is not legally required to be notified of where that proxy lives or who holds the guns. By outsourcing the confiscation process to the abusers themselves and allowing local proxies to hold the weapons, a protective injunction is reduced to a simple piece of paper. The victim is left entirely exposed to a fully armed abuser. This chart contrasts total domestic violence fatalities with the primary weapon used. In 2024, Wisconsin recorded 110 domestic violence homicides, the highest count in 24 years. Of those deaths, 71% were executed with a firearm. We can trace the direct consequence of passive weapon enforcement back to the fall of 2008. James LaHood had a highly documented history of abuse, active restraining orders, and deferred prosecution agreements. Because local authorities relied on paper orders rather than proactively seizing his weapons, LaHood retained his rifle. In September of that year, he used it to murder Charlotte Engel and shoot her daughter in the head. 16 years later, the pattern repeated itself. In early February 2024, Patricia Cooper was shot and killed by her husband in rural Price County. A judicial framework that fails to proactively strip lethal weapons from documented abusers will produce these fatal outcomes with mathematical certainty. Administrative procedures for disarming offenders vary wildly depending on where you live. In urban jurisdictions like Dane County, sheriff's departments prohibit unannounced drop-offs. If an injunction is filed, 911 dispatch deploys a deputy directly to the location to execute a controlled on-site confiscation. Compare that to Price County in the rural North Woods. The sheriff's office manages civil process primarily through a post office box or walk-ins. Victims are instructed to log into an automated web portal called VineLink to see if their abuser has voluntarily complied. Relying on this automated honor system creates a massive bottleneck between street-level officers executing high-risk warrants and the local judicial apparatus that processes the offenders afterward. Local police leaders have voiced intense frustration over this disconnect. During a 2025 City Council meeting, Phillips Police Chief Michael Housechild detailed a sting that resulted in 112 charges against repeat offenders. He noted that despite officers putting themselves at risk to make tactical arrests, the offenders were routinely cycled right back into the community. A victim's survival odds currently depend on the operating budget and procedural rigor of their specific zip code. For victims in the Northwoods, the terrain itself amplifies the danger of passive enforcement. Vast, sparsely populated counties suffer from extreme dispatch latency. If a domestic disturbance escalates, it can take a lone sheriff's deputy 30 to 45 minutes to cross county highways to reach the property. Combine that isolation with the state's proxy loophole. In regions with a dense hunting culture, an abuser can legally hand their rifles to a family member who lives just down the same dirt road. The weapons remain perfectly accessible, completely defeating the purpose of the court order. This graphic details the capacity crisis facing domestic violence shelters statewide. Severe federal budget cuts have decimated emergency housing programs, forcing facilities to turn away over 54% of all survivors seeking safety. That translates to nearly 14,000 unfulfilled requests for shelter. Organizations in Price County have lost 24/7 staff, crisis lines, and safe exchange programs. For isolated victims, this removes the only physical avenue of escape. When law enforcement outsources confiscation to the abuser and emergency shelters are defunded, The geographic isolation traps the victim in an inescapable kill zone. The administrative vacuum operating within the 9th Judicial District has become untenable. Passive civil process and victim-monitored honor systems must end. Local courts must abandon state-level proxy loopholes and enforce the absolute prohibition mandates of federal law. Under Title 18 of the United States Code, anyone subject to a qualifying domestic violence order is prohibited from possessing or receiving a firearm. The only proven method to stop the escalation of violence is the physical, proactive seizure of the weaponry by sworn law enforcement officers. For victims with no other safety net, closing the constructive possession gap is a baseline requirement for survival. Eradicating this failure requires engineering the honor system completely out of the judicial equation. This is the foundation of the U.T.A.V protocol. The core mandate requires the tactical confiscation of all firearms from prohibited persons by dispatch deputies, with no allowances for third-party proxies or self-reporting forms. Standardizing this aggressive mechanism across all rural jurisdictions strips the danger of zip code inequality from the process, ensuring the law protects every citizen equally. Replacing administrative negligence with physical mandatory enforcement